Hello everyone and welcome to the sixth talk in my series, Reducing Competition for the Serial Channels of Belonging, Bitcoin Modeled as White Noise, and the Radical Parallelization of Work in the 21st Century. Okay, part 6 got pretty crazy. Too crazy even for me. But let's jump into it. Between talk 5 and talk 6, someone very kindly sent me this book called Capital as Power, and I was in the middle of making talk 6 and I started reading this book, and the ideas in this book really resonated with the ideas I was working on. And if you want anyone to blame for this talk getting totally out of control, it's the person who sent me this book in the mail, okay? I didn't order it, someone sent it to me. You're a legend, okay? But you're responsible for this, okay? If it weren't for you, this talk would not be what it is right now, okay? So, since last time, there was an article that came out where there's a secret meeting between Mark Zuckerberg and Matt Hancock in 2018, and essentially Mark Zuckerberg was holding a gun to the heads of our senior cabinet politicians, and this is not good, okay? It's the job of our politicians to be regulating people like Mark Zuckerberg, not the other way around. And I just feel, Matt, you're not doing a good job, mate, okay? You're doing a very bad job. So you need to start doing much better than this, I feel. So we went over in talks 1 to 5 that when harnessing collective intelligence in the world today, this is the current benchmark, okay? And I think so far we've firmly established that. Let's seek to establish it further, okay? And on our Romeo-Juliet diagram, this Peter-Thiel 0 to 1 path goes from green to yellow to red to blue, okay? We get live, and then we have to find a sense of belonging through some sort of predictive capability. And we're in our talk series, I would suggest we're kind of in between the yellow and the red square, and that's sort of where all the magic happens. And I think whoever sent me Capital as Power in the mail probably understood that and front run it. So this move in which deftly embrace can happen from yellow to red, it almost happened with this talk, okay? It did almost happen, okay? But we got there in the end. So remember our Romeo-Juliet diagram model as a game. We can reduce eavesdroppers and Sybil attackers down to kind of Homo economicus, more rational type actors, and sort of less like sort of evil, scary Cthulhu monsters that want to kill us all the time. We can kind of use analysis to break down the big, dogmatic, scary stuff into manageable chunks. Okay, this is science, okay? And when defending against Oscar, Mallory will engage these 3 main sequestration channels, okay? And we talked about them in depth in our previous talks. Okay, in case you didn't know already, okay, in case you're behind the curve, okay, 0 to 1 process calculus is exactly the same as network penetration hacking, okay? Some people might have noticed this already. I'm going to spell it out right now, here, okay? And any network penetration test is done in exactly the same way as our entrepreneurial journey, okay? So there's a planning phase, a scanning phase, and while you're scanning, you can be eavesdropped upon, okay? And then there's gaining access, and there's the reputational manager trying to stop you from gaining access, and then you maintain access. So in our Romeo-Juliet diagram, we've modeled the gaining access as a Sybil attacker, but this is all to do with reputations, identities, passwords, okay? We need to sort of hack the password. Okay, that's the exciting bit in the movies, like in The Matrix, in Hackers. When you hack the password, you take the red pill and you find out where you're going. So let's go, let's do it. Let's take this red pill, okay? So so this and this are the same, okay? But the problem is when there is a game of winner takes all taking place. When gaining access means you get the whole chip stack, the whole thing, and there's little trust in broader society to help everyone else and yourself to build their own fortifications and maintain their own safety, something bad happens, okay? And this is exactly what happens now, okay, is that one person sort of gains access through super duper hacker magic and then cuts everyone else out and takes, like Quirky, 97% or close to 100% and leaves the Care Bears with close to 0%, okay? In gamer speak, this is getting yeeted, okay? Yeet, okay? So, let's go back to fundamentals of what Bitcoin is, because this talk is supposed to be about Bitcoin, okay? But it's going all over the place, and we need to stop going off on these tangents, okay? Bitcoin is a decentralized hackathon between machines competing to gain access to the next block in the chain of blocks, okay? This difficulty metric that Bitcoin miners use to calculate mining efficiency is the same as the difficulty of a password to brute force hack, okay? When I was first involved in Bitcoin, the Bitcoin miners were repurposed brute force password hacking machines, essentially, okay? That's what they do. That's why Bitcoin was designed in this way. Okay, so and each machine is attempting to brute force hack the password to the next block and have that hack sort of notarized or signed by their peers, okay? And then when access is gained to the next block, the miner is awarded Bitcoins corresponding to the block size at that time. Okay, so Bitcoin mining is network hacking, okay, but the network is designed in such a way that the hacking process is beneficial to all and strengthens the whole network. Okay, so this is what Bitcoin, in my opinion, did differently, but people, in my opinion, they don't think like hackers and engineers enough. They think too much like Austrian economists and just care about the neoclassical profit, calculate the mining economics profit, okay? They don't care so much about the implementation of what's going on, which is the key part between this yellow and red square, in my opinion, okay? So most network hacking games tend towards winner takes all or total accumulation by nature. Okay, poker tournaments are a great example of this, okay? At the end of a poker tournament, one player leaves with all the chips, okay? And this is not generally liked as a game dynamic at scale, okay? Poker players themselves don't abide by the rules of total accumulation of chips in the game of poker itself. In tournaments, further rules are layered on top of the accumulation rules, and they're rules based on elimination and the time at which you're eliminated from the tournament. So there's almost two games going on. There's the poker game with chips, and then there's the game that the event organizers are putting on to make sure that there's a payout structure that attracts the most people to the game in the first place, okay? And this is not what the Bitcoin community is really thinking about very much, I don't think even at all at the moment, because Bitcoin is just software, and the software itself is great, but now Bitcoin and crypto it's like $1 trillion industry, or pushing that sort of landmark number. The nature of it changes. It becomes industrialized, and all industrialized things exist within wider contexts that have more winner-takes-all type of network hacking dynamics, okay? Like politics, the energy industry, finance, Silicon Valley, okay? Silicon Valley's businesses and Seattle's business is to create Siren servers. These are winner-takes-all dynamics. So, and we're not being very discriminatory, I feel, in terms of like what people's motivations are. I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2011, and it's changed very much in that time, and I've sort of struggled to explain to myself and to others how and why it has changed. But thanks again to whoever sent me Capitalist Power, because that really helped me to understand this problem in great depth, okay? And because most games are winner takes all, ICOs, being Ethereum derivatives, were winner takes all things masquerading as blockchain-y type things, and they suckered a bunch of people into believing that the ICO bubble wasn't just a winner takes all scam job, it was actually part of the decentralization narrative, but it just completely wasn't. And everyone who sort of doesn't realize that is essentially crypto Wojak and needs to, in my opinion, wise up and understand what's going on here, because everyone who doesn't win at the accumulation game needs to go and get a real job, okay? If you have 1 million people in a poker tournament and there's one winner out of 1 million that wins it, the other 999,999 people need to go get a real job, okay? If that's what you got into without realizing and you find yourself the loser because that's probably what you're going to be, then you need to go get a real job. So this is a message of the ICO bubble, is kind of get a real job. And then who's responsible for signing off the work and adding the predictive capability to people who need to go get a real job? It's engineers, okay? And I would suggest to a lot of people that engineers are not your enemy. They're actually, we're trying to be your friends as much as we can, okay? But you make it very hard for us sometimes, okay? And this diagram that I won't get into again now, but I'm just going to put it here. And if anyone wants to ask me questions about it in person or in the comment section, you're very welcome to. This is a decentralized acyclic graph of proof of competence, proof of reputation, proof of ID, and proof of engineering authentication. So this is already possible. We can make kind of blockchain-y type things out of engineering. The current engineering standard documentation management is essentially a decentralized acyclic graph anyway. And if we're people who need to now go get a real job, this is how people who need to get a real job value in the workplace is maximized, because they have a very competent person looking after them, making sure what they do is of high value and belongs in society, and also meets the constraints of climate change and sustainability and all the rest of it, okay? I would argue that humans developed engineering and toolmaking in response to these rules of total accumulation, which ultimately result in despotism if they're allowed to grow at scale within any society. Whereas the engineering, because I would suggest that it is a much more of a blockchain type work structure, it limits the amount of total accumulation anyone can get in that industry, and engineers are always competing to sign off as much work as possible and be as productive as possible, but they can't put their signature on things they're not competent to do, and neither can they rush their work and just put things through they're not 100% sure of. So it's an example of someone putting their signature to something, which is an identity, and a tight management of competence and career progression, which allows for value add onto other people's work. Like when I worked in the oil industry, I'd sign off, a typical maintenance job I'd sign off would be 300,000 pounds worth of work, okay? And that's money for all our suppliers, all the technicians, essentially sort of everyone below me in the hierarchy gets to take home more money and produce more finished goods and what have you. There's sort of more skilled labor, more demand for skilled labor, and better assignment of skilled labor, the more engineers we have, okay? So we need to remember that engineers are our friends, okay? Because this is going to be very important coming up, okay? And then if we're talking about like blockchain 2.0 proof of stake, you see, Bitcoin works very well as proof of work, and I think it can be justified entirely as its own sort of network with its own fundamental principles. And its limitations and simplicity, I think, are a benefit to it in that way. When we're talking about proof of stake blockchains, what are we proving stake of? Okay, that's a very interesting question, because we're proving stake of tokens that pre-exist. So something like Ethereum 2.0 or R-Chain or any of these new blockchains coming out, what's to fundamentally stop someone from setting up a separate shard and assigning the tokens according to different metrics of value? There's nothing stopping that, okay? And I think if we're talking about blockchain 2.0 proof of stake, the main proof of stake we need to think about is the competency of people and what kind of jobs they're doing and the quality of their life, okay? And we can do all this stuff. I've already conceptually designed it, and I think if we're talking policy level and building a more utopian society for more people, this is the path we need to take, and we need to stop focusing on token prices and speculation and yada yada yada. That has nothing to do with customers and customer experiences, narratives behind products. It's just all sort of empty fluff, in my opinion. Okay, so if we talk about Mallory now, we first consider Mallory as a Siren server. Let's just consider Mallory now as a total accumulator. Mallory has gained access to a network and that runs on the rules of total accumulation. Or Mallory won a poker game that was like 1 in a million people. Okay, and Mallory won all the chips, and Mallory then doesn't want rules of elimination then imposed on that ex post facto. Mallory just wants to enforce these rules of total accumulation in perpetuity. Okay, and then if we talk about Sybil now, Sybil is mostly enforcing rules of a total accumulation. If we think of ourselves as Oscar, who as like a normal person with quite normal expectations, who doesn't want to enter games of total accumulation, then if we're running into obstacles, then it's because Sybil, and reputational attacks is because Sybil is working for Mallory, and Mallory wants to either total accumulation or sort of an order of magnitude more accumulation than you do. Okay. And this slide just kind of doubles down on that point. If we're good people who want to live in a stable society and understand the rules of total accumulation are unfit for kind of stable civilized societies, what have you, you're going to run into reputational attacks whether you're an engineer or a creative. Okay, so this just explains that in text. Sybil is going to enforce two main rules if Sybil is acting for Mallory as someone who wants to enforce accumulation. Number one, rules that protect Mallory's sort of Metcalfe value chip stack. These are insurance-based rules, because essentially the more Oscars harp on about how rules of total accumulation are bad, the more Mallory has to pay insurance premiums on her chip stack. Okay, so there's something that's like a constant sunk cost. Okay, that's like a deep operational cost that Mallory wants to minimize. And then in terms of creatives and engineering, Sybil is going to say that any newly proposed creative ideas or engineering ideas that run against the grain of total accumulation are going to just be bad by default. They're going to be sort of dead on arrival type of thing. Okay, so Sybil is this kind of password we need to crack, and Sybil is enforcing rules of total accumulation. Okay, and Satoshi Nakamoto cracked this code in a monetary sense in 2008 by launching Bitcoin. But there are three corners, I would argue, upholding the general system of capital, the general socio-economic system, the general system that puts food on people's plates every day. And this involves finance, number one, but it also involves insurance and engineering. Okay. Finance won't invest in engineering unless the engineers are of proper competence and insurable. Okay. And if they are of proper competence and insurable, then insurance companies can predictably price risk premiums on engineering capital projects, okay, which provide finance with a neoclassical economical reason to invest. Okay. But if we're not doing the engineering insurance bit well, then finance just sort of runs away with itself. And that's exactly what happened in the ICO bubble. Okay. So Capital as Power talks about this idea of stagflation, and it talks about stagflation as a monetary phenomenon. I would suggest it's more useful on a social level to think about it as a people phenomenon and a stagflation in engineering signatures, okay? Because science and technology engineering, they're typically not good jobs, okay? In some of the high-flying fintech or big tech coding things, they can be good, but typically in the engineering supply chain, it's not fun. There isn't really a shortage. There's quite a lot of graduates who are un or underemployed. So, but we hear this idea of a STEM shortage bandied around a lot, and we have heard it for quite some time now. And I think if we take a Capital as Power view of this, there are sort of two ways of viewing a STEM shortage. There's a shortage of quality engineering, a shortage of strong currency, which would be deflation, and then there's another way of looking at it, which is, maybe Sybil has a shortage of eminently disposable people to enforce the rules of accumulation upon, okay, which have nothing to do with quality engineering, okay? And if we're talking about engineering stagflation, okay, stagflation is like a combined deflation and inflation. What we have in engineering is a very obvious shortage of quality of engineering, okay, and an oversupply of disposable people because they've had this STEM shortage propaganda put into their brains, even as like young children in school, okay. We let the system go into schools and put this STEM shortage propaganda nonsense in their head, and then they're sort of coming out of uni with a 2-1 and can't find a job, etc., etc. So I think in terms of Capital as Power, describing stagflation as the way that the system of accumulation accumulates wealth towards itself, and in terms of thinking of Sybil as someone enforcing the rules of system access to someone who has gained access to the system through total accumulation and then wants to enforce total accumulation to maintain their access within it. This is a good way to think, okay? Because in the monetary system, there's so much sort of hocus pocus economics going on that you can't really like tell the wood from the trees a lot of the time. But with engineering, it's like a very simple, straightforward system actually, and you can actually like pick apart the mechanisms of what's going on. Okay, so the first thing is, we know from monetary theory like bad money drives out good. So Sybil will sort of, I've had people try and gerrymander the boundaries of competence on me because of like business concerns before. So I would imagine it's happened to me a few times, and I imagine it happens to a lot of other engineers as well. Creating dependency within engineering institutions. Engineering institutions in the UK are heavily in debt. Their people have no power to enforce rules on any of the businesses who pay subscriptions to be Prime members or whatever. So the engineering institutions are weak, and in a Romeo and Juliet diagram Oscar Mallory game, you would expect that to happen. Creating the dependency within the supply chain. I mean, they shunt even the most experienced best engineers running the whole show off. The operators shove those people off their own books and put them into the supply chain, because the operators aren't interested in really making their stuff work, from my experience in the oil industry. Okay, and then reputationally attacking those who disagree. Well, boy, have I definitely experienced that. Okay, so engineering stagflation will enforce two fundamental outcomes that we're already seeing: an oversupply of people who get fished into signing off work, i.e. staking their reputation on work that they're not really competent to stake their reputation on, where the decisions aren't being made because of engineering, they're being made because of accumulating capital. Okay, and then if it goes wrong, because there's an oversupply of people, one of them just takes the fall, and then they very easily find someone to take their place, because they've been advertising a STEM shortage to 9-year-olds for like 15 years now. Okay, and then an undersupply of finished work necessary of quality to be insurable enough to justify capital expenditure. Well, we saw this in the North Sea. The sun shone out of their arse when the money was flying around, but when the money dried up, a lot of people had a hard time selling their assets, because the quality assurance of them was dreadful, and they were essentially uninsurable. Okay, and then then you're not, if it's uninsurable, you don't get the list price. Okay, you have to sell to someone who knows the asset, and essentially the asset sells at a fraction of the cost of what it would have been if we hadn't been getting like 25-year-old technical authorities to sign off shit work for the previous kind of 15-20 years. Okay, and then these actions by Sybil on the engineering industry then externalize costs onto the insurance industry. Okay, and by stimulating stagflation of engineering signatures, subsequent insurance payouts are higher than expected. Okay, because things go wrong more. And if the insurance payouts aren't higher than expected, then the expected resale price of whatever asset a company is trying to sell goes down a lot, because the risks aren't being managed. Okay, and then this subsequently greatly limits the depth and breadth of insurance products that insurers are able to supply to the engineering industry, because the engineering industry starts to realize from their balance sheet that the signatures on these documents aren't worth what they were told they were worth to begin with, and this creates a fundamental distrust. Okay, and then instead of seeking to insure capital expenditure, the insurers go to the banker bailout system for their money, because it's a lot easier to go there for the money than it is trying to do QA of dreadful work done by fatties in Wood Group. Okay, so and this causes what I would argue is a fracture on this red square. Okay, and there are a lot of good engineers who are definitely on this red square, who are very experienced, good people, but they have views about society and about the way things should be done, and like doing things properly, doing things according to our stated values, okay, that are too expensive for Mallory on this blue square to want to be able to pay for, or just like admit our right, because admitting that anyone in this black triangle here is right just costs the system of accumulation too much. So what you end up with is essentially a black anarchist wing of this purple, of this red square, okay, who are deemed to be outside of the limits of what the blue square will accept, okay? And then likewise, the people who go along with the system of accumulation occupy this upper right purple triangle here, okay? And they're enforcing these rules of accumulation onto these people, okay? Go on LinkedIn, look at Steve Green, Sean Moran. These are experienced, good guys who are calling bullshit on some really dreadful, weak leadership in terms of how we should be running things. And they are just, their views are not accepted by the wealth accumulation system, okay? And this is a fracture here, okay? What we have here is a fracture due to those who want more blockchainy, more accountable types of networks, okay, and those who don't, okay. And I would say there's a lot of Bitcoin blockchain people occupying this purple square in terms of the bigger picture, okay. They might not think they are, but if you're only really thinking purely finance, insurance, then you're probably in this purple square, and you're probably feeding the problem, I would argue, okay. So this causes a radicalization of the boundary between engineering and insurance, okay, and this makes engineering radical and radicalized, and the less engineering is able to be insured, the less it is deemed to belong to the system of accumulation, okay. Thus engineering itself will start to become censored by the system of accumulation, and I've seen this it's even on social media, but it's definitely in the workplace, okay. And in terms of what this fracture represents, it represents a dead game, okay. And if we can't, if a game is dead, we're kind of forced into conflict, okay, because we realize things are super unfair, like Quirky's business model, okay. And this is what I would call an narco-accumulationist meme. It's saying like the yellow, you don't want to go to the yellow or the red square because they're dangerous, they're goofy, it's full of like weird people telling you should do things differently. And you know, maybe there is a fair amount of wisdom in sticking to the old school things and just sort of living your life and staying within the boundaries, because for me this meme is actually like hilariously true in a lot of ways. You know, there's a lot of scammy shit people on the yellow square and a lot of kind of goofy wannabe communists who don't really understand what it means on the red square, okay. And these people need to be avoided. So, you know, probably religion is better than being like a goofy ass communist, okay. But I would say, you know, this meme is essentially saying the same thing as this meme I made in the first presentation, okay. And what this is saying is that there's a fundamental schism going on, and I think there's two sort of intellectuals that describe this schism quite well, and it's Slavoj Zizek and Jordan Peterson, okay. But what's different about them is not what most people think is different about them, I would argue, okay. I don't think Jordan Peterson really understands what Slavoj Zizek is saying, and I don't think Slavoj Zizek really understands what Jordan Peterson is saying either, okay. So there's a kind of a weird dynamic between the two. But if we model Zizek as blanket ideological skepticism plus sort of Stalinist sympathies, like we need to have like hard violent power on top of what would I say, like productive power to make the system work. Okay, I'd say that like that's sort of right. And then so Jordan Peterson's blanking Jungian psychological pragmatism, which is kind of right, plus neoclassical sympathies. You know, I'm Scottish. I like these ideas of Adam Smith and stuff. So, but they're sort of these. They're both saying something right, but they're both, in terms of capitalist power, saying something incomplete and foolish, I would say. Okay, so in terms of the Hobbesian game of sabotage to achieve differential advantage and therefore profit, like this is the schism. Like that's where the war takes place right now. Okay, so I would say like the fallacies of the two of them would be Zizek thinking that Stalin was anything other than a massive piece of shit, and sort of Peterson believing that this idea of the Ayn Rand Reardon metal neoclassical entrepreneur exists. It doesn't. It's a nonsense. And then sort of using like Jungian psychological hocus pocus to kind of psychologize away this fundamental meta-violence and schism. It just sort of makes Jordan Peterson a de facto neoliberal HR guru, even though he doesn't realize he's being one. And I think that's sort of Zizek's criticism of him, and I think that's why Zizek wins in the debate. But overall, it's like never argue with idiots, I would say. So if then on top of this craziness, okay, so we have the Zizek Peterson craziness, okay, we have a schism that can be represented by Alex Jones in the bottom left corner and Elon Musk in the top right corner, okay, and these are sort of cartoonish media figures that are archetypes of what I would call the craziness of the media industry these days, and what fake news and manipulative media sort of leaves us with is sort of Alex Jones Band.video and like Elon Musk Twitter are kind of all we have left to go on. Okay, but really, in my opinion, what they're arguing about is Alex Jones wants more breadth. Okay, he wants the system to be more broad. But Alex Jones doesn't realize that what's stopping the system being more broad is the ability of the system to ensure the breadth. Okay, and then so he then wraps all that up in the Illuminati and the aliens from Saturn or whatever. I don't think he believes in aliens, but he may as well do in terms of the problem we're dealing with here. And then, you know, Elon Musk is much more interested in just dealing with things how they are. I'd say he's probably quite sympathetic with Zizek in terms of the system being some kind of post-Stalinist mixture of hard state violence and technological innovation, and he's okay with that, and therefore he's more interested in depth of accumulation. But essentially, top right is depth, bottom left is breadth, and my only point with this slide is to say, you know, when these two guys go on Joe Rogan, they're talking about aliens and DMT and Area 51 and all this kind of stuff, and it's like the problem has nothing to do with this. Okay, we don't need to create some kind of like modern materialist meta religion to just describe what is a fight between engineering and insurance. Okay, that's my point. And my broader point is I found myself sort of parachuted down as an entrepreneur, or I've sort of landed my wooden glider on where I thought the problem was, and I did, but I'm drowning out in all this noise, you know, aliens to the left of me, the Illuminati to the right, here I am standing in the middle with you type of thing, okay? And then, you know, even Zizek and Peterson are like, what the hell are you two techno Vikings talking about? Okay, they're like, this has nothing to do with the problem. Okay, but it has everything to do with it has nothing and everything to do with the problem at the same time. And this is sort of the problem with modern media and the noise it creates. signals can be just incredibly noisy, and they can drown out the true message, which is, this is a dumb slide, okay? That the point of this slide is that it's dumb, okay? If anyone doesn't get that, then they don't get the big picture, okay? And the big picture is this, okay? Really what, in terms of breadth and depth, and in terms of Zizek's solipsism of power and ideology, and if we weave in, if we imagine a little bit of artificial intelligence, essentially all Alex Jones is saying is there's some minimax function of post-Stalinism, and we need to minimize it because sort of this version of post-Stalinism is not cool, okay? I don't like it, okay? And Elon is saying, we need to maximize it because I do like it. I have all these amazing companies and it's working for me and it's great for me. Like, what's wrong with you, Alex Jones? We need to maximize it, okay? And Slavoj Zizek is basically not saying anything to this because to him it's all just part of the game. He's just sitting there like Robert Baratheon looking down upon his kingdom of weirdness and saying, yes, this is the weirdness that it is, guys, when we need to get used to it. But then Jordan Peterson saying something interesting in terms of like, maybe post-Stalinism is some sort of shamanic psychology thing and we aren't managing it. Like maybe there's some kind of psychological element in our hardwired, hard-coded into our lobster brain that is making us create this weird and crazy world that we live in. Okay, that might be right, okay? That might be the number one thing Jordan Peterson is right about, because he's wrong about a lot of other things, but in that way, I think he's right, and it would explain a lot about him as a person, I think. Okay. So, in terms of political sloganeering and like what we see in our day-to-day world and what we hear on the news and then on the TV, this Cree order of capital is marketed to us as fighting climate change, okay? Remember Greta from our first presentation, okay? New deals of all colors, red ones, green ones, blue ones, yellow ones, pink ones, okay? All the colors of the rainbow of new deals, okay? They're all the same deal, they're all the same Faustian deal, but we invent new colors for them because that's what makes it different, okay? Make America Great Again, or something beginning with A, something beginning with M, something beginning with A, something beginning with G, something beginning with A, okay? I can't think of it right now, but if you're in politics, make a new one and sell hats. Sell the merchandise, okay? Make it mean what you want to mean, okay? It means this, okay, but pretend it doesn't and make a job out of it, okay? Build Back Better, Great Resets, okay? And there are, everyone's talking about the Great Reset, okay? And they're all the one Great Reset, okay? Everyone's saying theirs is the best, okay? So then in terms of like this wishy-washy political sloganeering that we use to sell stuff to each other, most often politicians, but sometimes even chocolate bars, okay? It feels like this, okay? Which is, it's this, but it doesn't look so threatening. Look, the colors are kind of all the same as they were before. And they're pastel colors, okay? They're chosen to make you feel at home now, okay? And this is what the old schism boils down to in terms of a marketing exercise, is on the bottom you have tradlib, on the top you have radlib. So traditional liberal, radical liberal, and then on the left you have traditional conservative, and on the right you have radical conservative, okay? And thus at a sort of a social politeness level, when we're having discussions at the UN, this is sort of how we have discussions, okay? And then I think the reason Jordan Peterson fell out with the feminists is because Jordan Peterson's not a woman, okay? He can be the archetypal HR manager of all time of the Hudson Bay Company, or he can be a woman in her 20s who wants to lead a sort of stereotypical nice life, but he can't be both, okay? And I think that explains a lot of things. So if I had an HR manager, it would be for marketing the schism, for selling the used car I don't want to sell, I would use trad meme girl as my HR manager, okay? As the traditional conservative. I wouldn't dream of asking Jordan to sell something he would never want to sell. So we'll advertise an HR shortage in schools, and then we'll get just have more HR managers than we need, and we'll just find one and get one, and she can be our stereotype, okay? And then in our radical liberal square, we have Andrew Yang, who wants to have tax Amazon and create a universal basic income, okay? We have Peter Thiel from before, and we have, on the radical conservative side, I probably don't need to explain that too much to anyone on any side of the political spectrum. And then we have his colleague, Eric Weinstein, on the traditional liberal square. And I like Eric Weinstein a great deal. I think he's a very cool guy, okay? And that's where I'd put him, and I don't think he'd feel bad for me putting him there, okay? Wait, didn't we say that the yellow square is a square of violence? And am I saying that women get aroused by violence and that's why they're on the yellow square? Maybe I kind of am, okay? Watch Jordan Peterson speak to feminists, okay? And you'll understand what I mean. And in this respect, I think feminists are actually right when it comes to Jordan Peterson, because Jordan Peterson was never in the deal in feminism, and he's coming along as like Hudson Bay Company HR manager, trying to like sneak Hudson Bay HR Company stuff into the deal, and maybe that's not the conversation we need to be having, okay? And maybe that sort of explains what's going on right now. So in that respect, yes, run with me a bit. You know, remember Nicolette, Num97, Young Ramen from my previous talks was on my ideal yellow square, okay? And she had no problem with that, okay? She made art about like switchblades and like violent stuff, weird stuff. So if it makes you feel any better, just imagine that if you don't want like everyday girl next door on that yellow bit, imagine we'll put Nikki there, okay, instead, if that makes you feel better, okay? And in terms of this anarcho-accumulationism, anarchism doesn't really exist in terms of the politics we talk about day to day, okay? We invent politics so we don't have to deal with anarchism. But like Hobbes, I think, has the best answer to this and says there's something quite natural and ever present about anarchism. And I would say that the capital as power order of capital is anarchic, okay? And we can then use Hegelian fundamentals, dialectics, to unpick this anarchism and understand more about it, because it didn't arise by design. It emerged from competing mutually exclusive concerns, okay, that no one's admitting to. And that's normal, okay, that's just Diego Gambetta, Codes of the Underworld, okay? In any socialist society where government interferes in the economy a great deal, which it's probably bound to anyway, you know, I'm not anti-big government, I'm just saying if there is big government, then you're going to get this stuff happening a lot, okay? So in terms of the craziness of Jordan Peterson and Zizek and Alex Jones and Elon Musk appearing in the media, I sort of the characteristics on a personal level of how this anarchic system feels is to defer all problems onto ideology and society as opposed to actually designing solutions. And anyone who does come along and design solutions is kind of ostracized, okay? An almost schizophrenic mixture of both progress and tradition with little to show for either in reality. Like, typically we get the same old stuff rehashed from before, and sort of very little genuine progress filtering down to the everyday people. What amounts to solipsistic nihilism at scale under a shell of philosophy which justifies individual actions in the specific, and it externalizes effort onto the collective. So like becoming a YouTuber, having some kind of cult of personality where you're like purely a thought leader, all this stuff is kind of weird, and it, in the absence of like actual product, it's very weird. It's like having Steve Jobs with no product getting on stage talking about stuff. Like, what's interesting about that? I don't think anything is, but a lot of people do at the moment, and this is causing a lot of what is feeding a lot of this anarchy, okay? Because it gives rise to just a detachment from reality and chaos, and like people saying what they want without any consequence. And this gives rise to a lot of existential irony and hopelessness in young people who can't filter the signal from the noise and just treat everything ironically and become kind of detached, because detachment, it seems to be the only thing that makes sense. If every time you try and engage, you're just getting screwed over. So typically this system will measure data selectively in order to fit their own sort of predefined ideological narrative. In terms of capitalist power, will always seek to keep Tobin's Q as high as possible, thus like limit any sort of neoclassical logical reasons to invest in new greenfield innovation or developments. And we'll sort of layer all human activity on top of stated ideology like climate change, all these KPIs, like the Tony Blair KPIs up the yin yang stuff, jargon and hocus pocus, just sort of like trap you in a web of false judgment that's only seeking to enforce rules of accumulation. And that's what can kind of make it feel Orwellian, especially when like now, like this year, when everything's just fallen apart, and then we get this sort of added gaslighting on top, which sort of manifests itself as this kind of stuff. Like, is this personal isolation bubble an engineered solution to anything? I don't think so. Do you want a surveillance camera flying around your home, sending all data to Amazon? Okay. Do you want a 3D printed assault rifle? Because that's about the only piece of engineered equipment you can get open source that has sort of real value in the market today, is an assault rifle. Is that what we want? We can. There's a guy called JStark 1809 who designed this 3D printed gun with no engineering expertise whatsoever, taught himself. And then when it comes to the system of government and power trying to produce ventilators for COVID patients, they can't do it. Even though there's sort of open source diagrams and CAD drawings for ventilators freely available online, and the parts only cost like $100, even all our systems of power can't make a ventilator, even though it's not like they have to invent it from scratch. Like, you can just go Google the documents and get them, and go buy a CNC machine, a CNC mill, and a Raspberry Pi. But it's like they can't even do that. So, what are we doing? And then we have this surveillance capitalism stuff, Boeing's silly business model. People like even CDO squared type financial derivatives and stuff hasn't gone away, and people are trying to now implement that on the blockchain. Okay, is this a world of engineering competence? No, it's not. Okay, what do we have a shortage of here? Well, we don't have a shortage of engineers, but we surely do have a shortage of quality concepts and people who are actually out here solving real problems and not taking the absolute piss. Okay. So then in terms of the Boeing 737 MAX, it's quite simple to explain what engineering stagflation means. You replace the hardware systems, safety systems with software systems. Hardware systems require greater degrees of credentials to sign off on. Okay, you need to be like a chartered electrical engineer / safety engineer to sign off on the hardware systems. But if it's a software system, you can just go all the way around that. You don't need to do that. So, and this change is then not managed from a fundamental perspective. It's not like they find coders who are like 20 years trained in both code and safety to then sign off on these new software systems. No, those people get fired and targeted by management, because the real aim of replacing hardware with software is to outsource the safety to the lowest common denominator. And then planes fall out of the sky, because they make money all the time they're doing this stuff, okay? And then the plane falls out of the sky, and then Boeing say, oh, I never could have known, and they go and get their $50 billion bailout from the government and repeat this scam all over again, okay? This is a scam, okay? It's very easy to spot, and a lot of people think they can pull the wool over our eyes now, but okay, it's there in the open, okay? It's there, it's in the news now, okay? So this manifests generally as a preference for software over hardware, ostensibly for efficiency, but really to bypass the necessity of paying for proper engineers and proper insurance, and externalize these costs onto ordinary people who die when the plane crashes, okay? And management of change denialism. So people who claim like, oh, let's just sort of hook everything up to the internet and call it IoT, and then price it according to Metcalfe metrics, and then go and do a gazillion dollar ICO off the back of it. Okay, this is engineering stagflation. It's not Industry 4.0. It's bullshit. Okay, and then an overabundance of disposable people of inadequate competence. People like Sean Moran talk about that a lot. And people get their noses put out of joint for people saying this, but you get your nose put out of joint more when something goes wrong for you, and you know you're in over your head, and you get shot down, and then you have no comeback. So if you're getting your nose put out of joint by people saying this, trust me, it's worse when you're in over your head and then something goes wrong and you're the fall guy, okay? I've been there, I know. Okay, that is the end of everything at that point, okay? Either you take the fall and you become a bitch for the rest of your life, or you just say no and you're never welcome back, okay? That's the real men's game, okay? If you're upset by people saying this, you know, you haven't had that happen to you yet. Wait until it happens and then come speak to me, okay? And then over-reliance upon, there's a few people who are really, really, really good and can play this game, and they do, but they end up being sort of 1 in 1,000, and they kind of have to dodge bullets every day to stay alive. I know a lot of really good engineers still in the thing who are pretty much aware of everything I've told you already, and they still manage to survive. God knows how, but they do, and they are the real heroes, okay? I'm just telling you about this. They do this every day, okay? So typically what happens is the more safety focused engineers who care more about climate change and safety and environmental stuff, the stuff they should care about and the stuff society tells them to care about, the less in reality they actually belong to the economy, and the economy tells them they're not wanted and society tells them they are wanted, so they become like a kind of radical anarchists, okay? And then the sort of more business cash flow focused people who value money more And if you are a business person, you probably should. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, if you're in business, you have to put a price on money. And for some people, all this stuff doesn't matter to them, and they've joined the purple faction. But at the end of the day, this feeds this vicious cycle, and it is kind of causing a definite schism in engineering at the moment, a noticeable one. And I would say it's probably starting to feed into the insurance industry today as well. But having said that, okay, we've said all this about the black part, okay. Remember who's on there in a political sense? People like Nicolette, okay. They don't realize they're actually part of this anarchist faction with all this backstory to it, okay. They just like being around the action, okay. They get the dopamine rush from it, okay. And they're the crucial target demographic for unlocking the dissonance of what is going on. Okay, so that says cred order. I'd say it should say cre order. Okay, we should understand what's going on with women in their 20s more to really understand what's going on with people like Sean Moore and Steve Green. It's all connected to the same thing, okay? And by actually listening to women properly, I try to do it. It's very hard, but I really try my best. That's where the real gems come out and the real understandings of how this schism is tearing society apart, okay? It doesn't come from Eric Weinstein or Peter Thiel or Andrew Yang, okay? The problem is, in terms of product development, proper engineering, and proper politics, my grandfather on my mother's side was heavy into the Labour Party. He knew David Blunkett, Harold Wilson, okay? This is the real politics, okay? People of the old school understood this. We've forgotten it. And if we forget this, we may as well go screw the pooch, okay? We're not impacting the benefit of humanity politically if we aren't, and business-wise, if we aren't looking at this key demographic. It's just intellectual masturbation, basically, okay? And the point of the Romeo-Juliet diagram is that it helps us tune into this, okay? And if, whatever your opinion of me, you can't say that it doesn't, okay? Next, in part 7, we're going to discuss NZIG, which I first came up with in like 2013, 2014, and this last 6 or 7 years have really been about eliminating the obstacles to speak about this idea, which shouldn't be a competency management system for young people who need jobs, shouldn't be a controversial thing. But in reality, it is extremely controversial when it comes down to the basis of the Cree order of capital today. And I'm so pleased, and it's so nice to have knocked this Six Talk out of the park, because we can then sort of frame NZIG as a firewall against a spear phishing identity theft attack, okay? And that's really what's going on. And there you have it. NZIG turned out to be way weirder than I ever thought it would. When I started, thought this would be such a nice idea to do. Why can't I have a competency management system like I have Facebook, okay? And if you see the people surrounding this meme, you start to understand more as to why, and more about my super amazing journey, okay? And that's it for part 6. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you again for part 7.